I'm back after a month-long reprieve. Happy summertime. This is the first of 3 summer sessions for Effluvium. And we have Rachel joining me as my co-host. I'm going to be bringing her in very shortly. And then our special guest, Persolaise. And for this installment, we're going to be discussing cooling and refreshing fragrances. So one might argue that's a subjective description for a fragrance. How do we perceive cooling and refreshing? Are there certain notes that come to mind? Are there certain sensations? Or is it just a feeling that's hard to describe? I would love to hear from the viewers what you consider to be some of your favorite cooling and refreshing fragrances in hot, maybe humid weather. Be interesting to hear what your selections are. And we currently have 17 people tuned in. I'm glad to see everybody again. And we're going to bring in Rachel right now.
Hi, JJ. Hey. How are you?
Great to see you. Oh, I see some beautiful lilies next to you, is it?
Yes, these are gorgeous. So I'm in Taiwan, in Taipei right now, and they have the most beautiful flower. It's subtropical climate here, so we have the most beautiful flowers. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. And what time is it now in Taipei?
So it is 3 a.m. here.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I always appreciate your dedication to joining me for these Effluvium streams, even if it's the earliest hours of the morning. I'm humbled by that. We have some folks who are so fun. Yeah, they're always a fun time. We're going to say hello to just a few folks here, and then I'm not going to keep Persolaise waiting much longer because we are excited to hear of his thoughts on cooling and refreshing fragrances and his selections. We have Mr. Clean tuned in. Good to see you. And great to see you, Ashley Bissett. GMG, hello. I will pin that. I will star that, and we will revisit that later. I do see a little chuckle and a grin from Darius right now in backstage. So we will visit that in a little bit. And then Supply and Demand, good to see you. And hey, DJ, thank you for joining us. And Lucas, I really like beige for the summer. Smells like the most luxurious sunscreen. Yeah, that kind of honey with the lactonic elements. Yeah, and a little, the benzyl salicylate, which is in Perfumery. It gives sort of like a general floral, tropical floral, jasmine sort of feel, but it also happens to be used a great deal in sunscreen. And I believe because it has some effect in blocking the sun as well. So it has double the usage. Canadian Beauty Blog, great to see you too. And Heinrich, thank you for joining us. Okay, without further ado, we're going to bring in our special guest, Persolaise. Hi.
Hello, everyone. Hi, JJ. And hi, hello, Rachel. 3 a.m. Gosh, I can't believe you look amazing for 3 a.m.
Yeah, when she said that she was going to be doing this in the morning, I thought maybe 7 or 8, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but wow.
Well, I'm so excited. I couldn't wait to be here with two of the most eloquent people in the fragrance community.
But one of them couldn't make it, so you've got me instead, right?
Okay.
No, British humor.
Proper nonsense.
No, it's my privilege and my honor. Thank you very, very much. It's going to be great fun. And apologies for the croaky voice, because those of you who may have seen the video that I did on my channel yesterday, I think the voice has got worse and has now been joined by a sniffly nose, which is just what you want when you're doing a perfume video. But I think we're good to go. I'm okay.
I'll tell you, we're very forgiving here. We've had many a mishap during our streams that we're able to look over. I actually started to have a bit of a runny nose last night, and mysteriously it's gone today, but you never know with such things what's going to be the next stage. So I'm waiting for the next shoe to drop. So hopefully I'm not running coming down with a cold myself. So all is well. So our subject for this first summer session is cooling and refreshing fragrances. Fragrances that give you that effect, especially when the weather is almost too much to bear. And Persolaise, I want to kind of get your thoughts on what you would personally perceive as fragrances that would fall into this category.
Well, I suppose the first answer that comes to mind is the cliches, the obvious things, and I suppose they've become cliches for a reason, right? I mean, it's citruses, particularly things I suppose like lemon and mandarin and grapefruit. But I guess if we were to put those cliches aside for a few seconds, then some of the herbal notes, some of the aromatic notes can be very effective. It's interesting, isn't it? You mentioned humidity just a few minutes ago, and quite often with some of these scents that I reach for when the weather is warmer, I have this image of them almost like cutting through the weather, sort of separating the mugginess that surrounds you. They seem to have this kind of almost like humidity dissolving quality. One of the scents that best does that, and it's not one of the ones that I brought with me today, but I mention it because I see that there's a little bit of a kind of online hoo-ha, an online drama about it, because apparently it's being discontinued, and it's from Hermès. It's one of the Jean-Claude Ellena colognes, the Eau de Narcisse Bleu.
Yes.
And maybe this is going off on a tangent that we don't have time to go down. It seems a few Hermès scents are being discontinued, which I think would mark the first time that several Hermès scents are being discontinued en masse. But anyway, as I say, that's an aside. So those sorts of scents that seem to have a piercing, dissolving quality, but without being too shrill or strident or inducing a headache. So they somehow manage to do all of that while being delicate. And I guess that's the trick to pull off. Maybe it's something about naturalness. Maybe it's something about veering away from overly synthetic notes. So yes, start the discussion off with that one.
You got it. Yes, I just learned of that Eau de Narcisse Bleu, which is a bit of a surprise. I mean, I just didn't really expect. I mean, I didn't know. I know some of these decisions tend to be based on sales or trends, I suppose. But are the other ones that are discontinued included in that particular line, or is it across?
Well, I should say that that this is often the way with the internet, isn't it? That something goes in inverted commas viral, but you realize that actually it stems from one post or one comment that somebody's made somewhere, and then you realize that it hasn't been verified. Although I think that the source at the core of this is reliable. I think what makes this interesting is that I remember years ago, I think it was the very first time I met Jean-Claude Ellena, actually. He said that one of the things he admired about Hermès was that they never discontinue perfumes.
Right.
And if you think about it, that actually I think has been the case, that pretty much every single Hermès scent that wasn't meant to be a limited edition or anything like that has always been around, right? I think I'm right in saying that. All of the major ones.
Pretty much,
and so this list includes Brin de Réglisse. It includes the paprika from the Hermessence range. It includes Muguet porcelaine.
No, and that's one of my favorites from.
But is that to do with regulatory issues?
Oh, that's true too, because
I don't know.
Yeah. I heard about it first with the Eau de Narcisse from Olivier David. He was posting about it on Instagram. That was my first knowledge of it, and I mean, he seems to be a relatively reliable source, but I mean, that's a bit heartbreaking, but you don't want to get stuck on that for too long. No. Let's on to we have a very nice comment here that here I am with a little bit of my distracted nature. Fernando Milan, a geranium, cyclamen, carnation smell like spring where I'm based, because during the summer even the lightest citruses and white musks are too much. Funny that you mentioned geranium, because one of the fragrances that I'm sharing happens to be geranium forward. Persolaise, why don't we start with your first selection?
Okay. You're going to have to kind of because this is unusual, me turning the table, having the tables turned, because
Yes,
as you know, I can like talk and talk and talk. So you will have to kind of call time when it's my.
You'll see that. You'll see this. I'll come up with it.
Okay. So I decided, most unlike me, I know, I decided to be a little bit perverse with my selections, because one of the things that happens when I do my lists, for whatever reason, a themed list or something, is that I try to choose perfumes that are currently available. We were speaking about discontinuations. But for today, the ones that I've brought along with me are all discontinued. I thought, let me try and talk about ones which I love having in my collection that you either can't get anymore, or you can't get them in this particular form, I should say. But they're still available out there if people want to hunt them down. So let me go to one from 2004, I believe. Not the easiest scent to find information about online, but this was a flanker of a perfume that you will all know. It's a perfume that originally came out in the late 1950s. And if I do this, then you will all immediately go, aha, it's Guerlain's Vetiver.
Yes.
But this is not going to work with this camera, but this is what they released as the frozen fragrance, or I think they called it the Eau Glacée. Can you see that there? And of course, it's perfect for our theme. So it is the vetiver that we know and love. Apparently, I'm killing Natasha according to the comments, but okay. It is the vetiver that we know and love, which is to say that it's one of the best vetivers out there. But it does have, I don't know what they've done to it. I don't know whether it's basically something that that I think it was done by Jean-Paul Guerlain, but I don't know that for a fact. I think they went to the top notes and they made the top notes even more sort of coolly citrusy. And of course, because you said salicylates, now I have salicylates in my head, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe this has a kind of sunscreeny floral quality to it as well. But it seems to me that it's maybe just a bit more mandarin-like, maybe a bit more lime-like, maybe a bit happier than the original vetiver, and it absolutely has that piercing, like this sort of green laser beam suddenly like shooting through the clouds and parting them and making the mists and the mugginess and the heaviness just move away. And I think it also kind of holds the swampiness of the vetiver base at bay for a little bit longer than the original one does. So I don't wear it a huge amount. I don't know about you, because that's what happens with these perfumes that are in my collection that you can't get anymore. I'm so stingy with them that stinginess translates into hardly ever wearing them.
Right.
But I love having it in my collection. I love sniffing it every now and then. And I think it's also maybe a little bit soapier, a little bit more cologne-like than the original, because smelling it now I'm thinking, oh, it's making me think of the Acqua di Parma Colonia, that really, really beautiful gentleman-like clean quality.
Indeed.
So yes, I'm going to dare to ask whether either of you have ever tried this one.
I haven't.
Yep.
But you have, Rachel. I have not had the pleasure.
Yes, so there's so many people who've spoken about this fragrance in the community, and I know, dying to try it because of the high recommendations from so many people. So I did order a sample of this from probably the Perfumed Court is probably where I got it, and wore it for a week, and it was really lovely.
Perfumed Court is a great resource for sampling, especially things that would otherwise be really inaccessible. How long has this been discontinued?
Oh gosh, pass. I have no idea. I wouldn't be surprised if actually maybe it only lasted a few years and then it sort of went, because I think round about that time they also toyed around with a vetiver sport. I'm sure somebody watching is going to be able to tell us, but I think maybe it stuck around for about 3 or 4 years and then it was gone. I'm guessing.
That's a very short period of time. I made sure to put that on my list of things to sniff. Maybe not purchase, because I'm at that point where I'm getting a bit exhausted with spending the exorbitant amounts for discontinued fragrances now. It's much more difficult now than even 2 or 3 years ago. It's just everything is pricier, but I think people are taking advantage of that. but that is a great selection, and I do want to sample it. Thank you for sharing that, Persolaise. Rachel, what would your first choice be?
Oh, so I'm not sure if, well, first of all, I'm in Taiwan, which is a subtropical climate. So exactly, Persolaise, what you're talking about is cutting through that heat and humidity is so important. And being in this climate, I'm really learning how to wear fragrance kind of anew again, right? Versus the North America. And I live in the north of North America, close to the Canadian border normally. And so I don't know if you've ever studied or remember the kind of history of greenhouses or hothouses in Europe and North America, where people would bring, you know, these tropical plants to Northern Europe, Northern America to grow there and grow in these hothouses to really bring the idea of the tropics, to warm them through the winter. And I found once I got here that I wanted some fragrances to bring those boreal temperatures, you know, those kind of Arctic places. I wanted to bring them to me, right? Those kind of plants, right? Those kind of plants that grow in like the Highlands of Scotland, or, you know, in Scandinavia, that have that like winter in their DNA, that just smell like cold places. That's what I wanted when I got here. And so I found just at a niche store, there's a great fragrance community in Taiwan, by the way. It's huge. Lots of niche brands and all kinds of stuff. And I found this Swedish brand that I had not heard of called Bjork and Berries. And I went and I tried their line of fragrances in a little niche store here in Taiwan. And I ended up getting one called Botanist. And so this one it's like green and woody and fresh. It has green apple, cassis, black tea, green accord, patchouli, vetiver, and birch tree, right? And then what's really cool is they don't cite a perfumer, which normally is a red flag for me, and I would probably pass, but they do have a full ingredient list, which I really applaud. So they have the perfume, the water, limonene, hydroxycitronellol, linalool, citrol, citronellol, isoeugenol, eugenol, and geraniol. And so you can really see how so many of those are cooling, you know, cooling and cutting, like the citrol and all that are very cooling and cutting ingredients. Plus the naturals that they say come from Sweden itself. So yeah, it's really nice. It's just woody, fresh, green. It's supposed to smell like walking through a Swedish forest.
And you said the name is Bjork and Berries. Bjork
and Berries.
Just like the Icelandic singer, Bjork and Berries.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh. Persolaise, are you familiar with this house?
Yes. Now, Rachel, this is what I love about these sorts of discussions, because I wonder if this is where we kind of part company a little. Now, my memory isn't as good as it used to be, but I seem to remember giving a kind of semi-scathing review of this.
Oh.
No, well, I can't. I think there's something about, or maybe I'm getting, because there are two Scandinavian brands that aren't there. One is this Bjork and Berries one, and the other one is called, I think, Skandinavisk. And I remember thinking that the Skandinavisk scents were really quite kind of thin and monodimensional, and just you sort of smell them and 2 seconds later you've forgotten them. I think maybe Botanist, I thought was I can't remember some that's why I need to be careful what I say, because there have been times when I've sort of said, oh yes, that I seem to remember that was a good one, and then somebody sends me a comment saying, you slated that on your video, what you use. so I'm going to go with, I can't remember what I thought of it, but I do remember that I reviewed it and I wrote about it. I think it's a brand that has found an audience in the UK. I think they're stored at a few retailers. You know, it's the kind of it's a brand that has the kind of aesthetic that appeals to a certain kind of shopper. And I guess if you want to bring that kind of Scandinavian elegance into your lifestyle, then you might reach for a brand like that. And they've got a few scents under their belt now. I think they're doing okay.
And I'm glad you said that, actually, Persolaise, because I have found, and this is really just the effect of the climate that I'm in, I've found that, like, for example, I went after I saw your review of the Joe Malone, the Highlands collection, and I remember you weren't super impressed, and I was in a mall, and so I thought, oh, well, it's there, I'll spray it on. And in the store, in the air conditioning, I wasn't super impressed either. But then when I walked outside, the effect of the heat and the humidity outside, it totally changed the fragrance on my skin, and it really was functional in this way that surprised me. Whereas some of the fragrances I brought specifically for the weather ended up being too much, like too thick, too heavy, in a way that I completely did not expect, right? And so And so
But
I'm actually kind of learning through being here, like, oh, maybe some of these products that I would maybe as a frag head kind of normally consider too wan or too pale or too thin, like they have a function and this kind of heat, for me, at least on my skin.
But I think if I can come back, that you're actually raising a very, very valid point, Rachel, that everything that we're talking about in this session is the very nature of this discussion, isn't it? Is about perfumes that work within a certain context, right? So the context of warmer weather, and I guess we can't get away from the fact that everything is contextual. You know, if we can make a kind of analogy with movie criticism, why is it that certain films, well, take for example the film that was acclaimed a few months ago, you know, the new Netflix version of All Quiet on the Western Front, within the context of pretty much every single country outside Germany, it was praised and lauded, whereas within Germany, it kind of wasn't. And context is huge, and there is some sense that just will click in certain contexts, won't they? And yes, absolutely. When I go away on holiday to certain places, I will find myself wearing things that I wouldn't necessarily ever dream of wearing at home. So yeah, I completely get what you're saying.
And most of the time for me with fragrances that I attempt to match whatever the environment that I'm in, it ends up being, you know, unless of course I've already worn in that environment, it's more predictive. It's more sort of, you know, what I would refer to as more suitable in that environment. And it's not always as predictable as it seems. And sometimes these notes that would seem to have a, you know, a refreshing effect on them could be actually oppressive in certain conditions, which is what I learned through just sort of going through some of the choices that I had. And I was surprised with the ones that I, you know, with what I set aside. Like even some citruses, you would think, well, that's a no-brainer, but things they're very heavy in grapefruit to me would work better sort of like in like a warm and dry situation rather than like a hot, humid sort of situation. Not to, to get too, you know, fine a point on it, but I think that it's just a matter of giving it a try and seeing what it does, you know, in a certain context. And it can be really surprising. The one that I wanted to choose next, and it just so happens to be an Hermes, and I was wondering if it would be one of the ones that would, one from, if any from the Un Jardin are going to be discontinued. Hopefully not this one. Un Jardin après la maison.
Yeah, it is apparent. It's on the list, which is just beyond scandalous.
My God, I consider it to be my favorite out of the entire line.
It is. Sorry, I'm going, but it is an extraordinary piece of work.
Yes, and to me, this typifies a cooling effect to me, and it has had me thinking about, you know, and correct me if I'm a little misinformed with it, but in certain non-Western medicine, you know, there are ideas of certain materials in nature that have warming effects and cooling effects. I think maybe in like Ayurveda. And to me, the interesting paradox is ginger, which we might assume is spicy, in this, to me, has a cooling effect on my skin. Because it sort of, I don't know if it almost, whatever is used in this, natural or otherwise, it almost opens the little tiny capillaries on the very top surface of my skin and feels cool. So for those who are tuned in who are not aware of Un Jardin après la maison, this stands for after the monsoon. So it's supposed to evoke that feeling after these heavy rains, and everything has been dampened, and it just brings out all the qualities of the, you know, of this equatorial environment surrounding you. And it has a notable ginger. There's a ginger flower note, but what's more interesting is I'm not sure if Jean-Claude Ellena actually used the material, or maybe Persolaise, you know, you can confirm this, but ginger lily, which is not related to ginger, the ginger lily flower, which actually you can produce a solvent extracted absolute from it, has this profile that would go well with the ginger, but has almost this sort of tart, tangy quality to it. I've worked with the raw material, and I could swear it is in this, at least in a small quality, and that sort of lends to that refreshing quality as well. I wouldn't say that this is forwardly aquatic, but it is watery, and it just feels, it has that ambience on my skin. So that was my selection, my first of the three of mine that I set aside, Un Jardin après la mousson. Are both, so obviously Persolaise, you're a very big fan of this. Rachel, are you familiar?
Oh yes, I have my own bottle. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Now it's your turn, Persolaise.
Oh, okay. I'm flattered that you think I would know what Jean-Claude Ellena has used in that scent. I don't, but I did. At that same time when the first time that I met him, I had to thank him for Après la Mousson, and I said to him, you know, I think it's an amazing perfume, but I don't personally feel I can wear it. I just really love smelling it. And he just kind of gave me this look and said, but that's okay. Because I do, with Après la Mousson, I enjoy smelling it more than anything. Yeah, it's. I can see that it would have been quite divisive and difficult for some people, but maybe that's why it had to go.
Yeah, well, maybe it is that sour, tangy kind of. Maybe. You know, there's these facets that are not necessarily as accessible. And before you go ahead, not to go off on even a further tangent, but I love the topic, the idea of appreciating fragrance even when you're not necessarily wearing it on yourself. That is a great topic for another time. But yes, proceed with your second.
Ginger, I completely agree with you. And ginger, I think we'll come back to with my third selection. But for my second one, I'm going to go for one which... to all intents and purposes, hasn't been discontinued at all. It is still around. It is still doing very well. It has lots and lots of flankers. It has, you know, several updated advertising campaigns. But I think most people will agree that it is now not really sufficiently like its original form for us to be able to, you know, regard it as though it's the original. And this is a very, very, very literal interpretation of your theme, JJ, but I think it works. From 1988, the original version of Cool Water from Davidoff, composed by Pierre Bourdon. And I have been, you know, I learned the hard way that what you need to look for is a bottle that says that it was distributed by Lancaster, and this is the one that I've got. And I think there's all sorts of other things that you look for, like the Davidoff logo and all the rest of it.
Right.
I can't believe that this is actually from 1988. The Glastonbury Music Festival took place here in the UK just this last weekend. It finished on Sunday, and I didn't go. The music festivals are not my thing, but we've been able to watch some of the highlights on TV, and Rick Astley did a set of all people, and so of course he had to sing Never Gonna Give You Up. And Never Gonna Give You Up was first released in 1987. And it made me think, oh my God, that's around about the same time as Cool Water. And
that's right.
It's just like, gosh, it's in some ways like ancient history, but in some ways like yesterday. So Cool Water, I wonder, I've never met Pierre Bourdon. I don't think I'm going to get a chance to meet Pierre Bourdon now. He's quite a reclusive figure, as far as I know. But I wonder... when he was making this, whether he knew what its name was going to be, because Cool Water is just the most perfect name for this. It is very 80s in its execution. You know, when we smell this now, we can tell that it's sort of come from the mid to late 80s in the sense that it's got huge dose of dihydromercenol, you know, that very, very, very ubiquitous kind of citrusy, transparent, woody material that was just such huge effect in Drakkar Noir. But what's interesting about it is that when you kind of, you know, when you kind of play these little mind games with yourself when you're smelling perfumes, if you tell yourself when you smell it that what you are going to see at the very beginning is a huge mandarin, you know, like so huge that actually you can't detect it anymore because it's taking up the entirety of your vision. But when you sort of say to yourself, okay, I'm going to see the mandarin, then suddenly you can't unsee it, and you realize how clever it is, that it's all just based around this huge citrus. And I think it's the kind of effect that Andy Tower was inspired by when he was making things like Orange Star. You know, just like to really go with the citrus note, with the sweet citrus, and place it on a beautiful kind of ambery base. and it works. There's also just a touch of edginess to it. You know, there's just like a little touch of bite to it, which is maybe actually what creates that slightly cooling effect. But I wore this to death. You know, this came out at a time when my mum was working in perfume retail, and my interest in perfume was just kind of growing and growing and growing. I wore this loads, but I did not wear it as much as Davidoff scent that didn't do all that well, but I loved it. Do you remember Relax?
I was about to mention Relax, as a matter of fact, because I had already had a bottle of Cool Water when I was 11 years old. I started on the fragrances pretty early. I guess the rest was history. And I recall, I don't know if it was that year or the year that followed, that I think that was the next one that was released. And I thought, well, this would be a great accompaniment to what I already have with Cool Water. And then I had Relax.
But wasn't Relax great?
Relax was so good. I was the king SHIT in junior high school because I wore Relax, and Relax was like a hip scent in 1990, 91. And it's funny how much it goes for, because I remember I bought it in a discount department store. I know, and now it's been discontinued for so long and it goes for so much. But yeah, Relax. Do you still have any left? Do you have any anywhere?
I'm pretty sure I do have I've certainly got a couple of minis, which are still in pretty good condition.
Yeah.
But you know, at the time, so you and I must be kind of roughly similar age. Maybe I'm sort of a couple of years older than you, but it's so funny at the time. You never sort of dreamed that these things might become really precious commodities one day. You just thought, yes, well, you know, sure, I could do 30 sprays in the morning and another 30 in the evening. You know,
I went through like at least 6 bottles of it.
Oh gosh,
go around forever. And what's interesting too is, you know, if you're of a certain age, and then you have this new crop of perfume enthusiasts, and they see these fragrances as so hallowed, and partly because of their inaccessibility, and you realize that you have a history with it. It's sort of a trip to think that because they weren't necessarily there for it, it wasn't in their zeitgeist necessarily, that they see it as so much more precious. And I find that amusing and also kind of a bit wistful, because it's just a sign of, you know, things that come and go over time. But yeah, Relax. That's funny. Yeah, I loved it. Never replaced it though. After the mid-90s, I moved on to other ones.
Yeah, I guess I did as well, actually.
Yeah. Rachel, what is your next selection?
So my next selection, because there's the idea of bringing northern climates into a hot and humid place, and then there's kind of the opposite idea of really just asking the locals what they do, right? How to like working with local materials, right, that grow where you are. And there's this wonderful local Taiwanese brand with a local Taiwanese perfumer called Pan. And they actually won in 2022. They won an Art and Olfaction Award for this fragrance. This is Aged Tea. And it's based on on a mix of 3 actual special kinds of Chinese tea. There's a native oolong tea, there is a green tea, and then another black tea that it's really fundamentally a mix of these 3 kinds of tea, as well as a little bit of just a tiny bit of smoked plum. And you would think, oh gosh, that must be so heavy, but actually it's not. The way that it is made, and these are all accords, right? Because I talked to the perfumer, and apparently it's not like it's extracting the actual tea leaves it's not really doable, or at least it's not recommended, right, in fragrance creation. And so these are accords that the perfumer has created, which is wonderful. They're brilliant. And so you really do move through, like you can smell each type of tea, and the green tea for me is especially predominant, especially in this weather. And apparently I was speaking with her, if you wear this fragrance in different types of weather, the different types of tea come a little bit more or less predominant. And in the summertime, the green tea note is really nice and fresh and verdant and like cutting, and it's so lovely. So I would definitely recommend, I don't know if they're available outside of Taiwan in many places, And I'm going to bring some samples for you, JJ, and maybe we can figure out a way to get them to Persolaise. I'm not sure, but definitely this house has lots and lots of fragrances based on like local flora and fauna, and especially the local. There's tons of tea that's grown in Taiwan and the local varieties that are very famous, and especially grown on this like kind of volcanic soil that they have here in the mountains. That's absolutely fabulous. And again, because it's working with the local flora and fauna and the people who live in this climate all the time, I was so surprised by how well the tea note worked as kind of cooling.
It's a beautiful bottle too. I love that sort of olive color. The shape too. Look at that.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have you close up there so that we can see. We did a little show and tell, and this is the show. Oh, very nice. The little P insignia. Beautiful bottle. I have to say, I'm very visually oriented too with this hobby. I mean, sometimes I have been burned as a result, but I trust your judgment that it sounds great, and I love tea scents. Very nice.
Yeah, it's probably the best tea fragrance I've ever smelled. So, yeah.
Oh well, that is quite an accolade.
And
because
tea is so
the
often...
perfumer.
No, go on, Rachel. Sorry.
Oh, just real quickly, the perfumer worked for years and years and years as an actual tea master, right? She would perform the tea ceremonies and educate people on tea varietals. So she's very much an expert in that area.
And Persolaise, what were you going to say about tea?
I was just going to say that I'm fascinated to try it, because tea is so often badly done, isn't it? It's like almost in perfume speak, there's something that we now have to accept as tea, even though when we're smelling it, we're going, yeah, okay, I get it. This is supposed to be tea, but actually this doesn't make me think of tea at all.
This makes for a great segue, because my next one is a tea fragrance that I enjoy. Okay. But it doesn't make me think of tea at all. Okay, come on. And it is very cooling and refreshing to me. It's from one of the Bulgaris, the Haute Bleu. And Haute Bleu does not give me very much in the way of tea, but what it does is it gives me this very sheer, gauzy sort of violet, which is sort of unusual. Like, I don't normally run into that type of violet accord. And, it starts off, if we're looking at the development curve, it starts off very much with a punch, because it has the herbal elements, the lavender. I do detect something that I think is supposed to be shiso, and I don't mean to say that in a cheeky way, because when I look at the notes pyramid, I don't see it as gospel. So I'm like, whatever that is, I think that probably was supposed to be the shiso. I don't know if I perceive it as such, but I like it. And then it dries into this violety, kind of very gossamer sort of irisy, violety feel. And somehow it's just, it feels really ethereal. And it's pretty stuff. And one of the ones that doesn't really get discussed nearly as much as, say, maybe Haute Noir or the Haute Blanc. But I find it very beautiful and a great summer wear, and I have plenty of it here. I just recently picked this up, actually, and I have plenty of it to use. So that is my my second selection, Haute Bleu. Do you two know about this one? Do you have opinions on it? And don't be afraid to share your opinion on it. It's okay if it's a negative one, but
I've never smelled it.
I like it.
No, I have, and I remember liking it. And I think that range doesn't get as much love as it deserves. I mean, obviously, everything, how many times are we going to mention Jean-Claude Ellena in relation to like cooling, refreshing scents? Because his green one obviously got a lot of attention. Yeah. I've got a lot of time for white. I think white was done by Jacques Cavalier, I think, but somebody can check it out and tell me if I'm wrong. And I also think black is a really, really interesting and convincing and kind of rare example of a genuinely kind of light, oody scent, something that manages to sort of be oody and yet also be quite sheer and transparent. No, they're for what they are, they don't pretend to be anything they're not, those scents. And I think they do a good job. But again, when I spray the white one, I don't think tea per se.
Yeah. Curiously enough, out of all of them, the only one that does make me think of tea is the Auteuil Noir, and almost more like a Lapsang Souchong tea, like a smoky Lapsang Souchong that dries into this, more understated oud. And that's my favorite of all of them. The only two that I went full bottle on was that and this one here. But yeah, I think the only one other than that would perhaps be the Auteuil Vert, the green tea, to a degree, but it's more like a bergamot, though. So even though it's calling itself Auteuil Vert, I feel like it's more like an Earl Grey tea. So, yeah, that one is mine. And on to you, Rachel, for the third one.
Oh, maybe does Persolaise want to go, or?
Oh, did I skip you, Persolaise? Did I just?
Well, I don't mind.
Right
we can go to Rachel and come back to me. It's fine.
Do you want me to? We don't have to go in a very strict order here.
Well, you're in charge. You say who goes. Let's let you asked Rachel to do it. Let's go with Rachel.
Why don't we just keep going in that direction then, and then we'll have you go next. Okay.
So you will all know this. This is one of the few bottles that I brought with me that actually really works. And I think, Persolaise, you mentioned it earlier. This is the Acqua di Parma Colonia Club. I'm not sure if you were referring to the line or to this bottle, but this works really well. It actually, I think a lot of people know this one as like a refreshing kind of cooling fragrance. It's lovely. It has, citrus. It has the mint, the shiso kind of flavor to it, and also has, they say ambergris, but kind of the ambroxan, right? Material that makes it like the materials, they kind of explain it as like a sporty, kind of like you're playing tennis, you want to wear something like that goes with your sweat, right? Kind of a fragrance. And I feel like it really does, work in that way. And it's really fabulous in the heat because it really blooms on your skin, and it makes your skin because when your skin gets really hot and you're kind of radiating, your body is radiating heat, and it gets a little yucky and sweaty. This makes that body heat that you're producing smell really good. So I think it just is so functional and works so well that it's really working, and it doesn't really add a lot of thickness or heaviness. And it doesn't, because some perfumes, even if they have all those notes, all those citruses, all those camphoraceous notes, all those lovely notes that you imagine will be cooling, sometimes they're layered on so thickly, or the materials are done so thickly that the smell around your face ends up being oppressive. But not with the scents, at least that I've smelled so far from this line. And that they really do, they're diffuse enough, and that they really do kind of blend in with your skin, and they make what the heat that you're radiating just smell really nice. And it doesn't get too oppressive around oneself. So more than ever, I've enjoyed wearing my perfumes from, and I brought a few others too from the blue line that have just been working really well.
And that's another one that I have not tried. I haven't really explored too much. I mean, maybe I should be ashamed to say I haven't really explored too much of Acqua di Colonia. That whole, there's a handful, but that one I haven't experienced. Persolaise, are you familiar with that one?
Yes, I know that one. I mean, the one that I mentioned was the kind of original cologne, the Colonia, and I think I would still be the kind of flag bearer for the original cologne. But the variations they've done on the colognes have been very interesting. A couple of years ago, I think they did one called Colonia Futura as well, which I think was meant to have had, with a kind of nod towards sustainable materials. And Acqua di Parma, again, is another brand. I mean, it's massive in Italy. It is genuinely massive in Italy. It's such a status thing in Italy. But there are so many in that blue Mediterranean range that are really worth checking out, aren't they, Rachel? I mean, some of them are just such fantastic evocations of certain sorts of citrus fruit or certain sorts of flowers. An underrated brand, I would say for sure, outside of Italy. Everybody knows the cologne and loves the cologne, but they don't seem to want to go beyond that.
Absolutely, yeah. And then this one actually reminds me. Do you all know that the fragrance of 40 Love? Have you ever heard of that classic fragrance?
Jean d'Après. 40 Love was Jean d'Après. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it kind of has that same vibe, but lighter, which is really great in the heat. Yeah.
Wow.
And Rachel, you were talking about how some of the, you kind of read the list of notes and you think, oh, this is going to be great. And for some people, the Holy Grail is like the citrus scent that lasts forever. But sometimes when you get those perfumes that actually have a citrus scent that lasts for ages and ages, you realize that actually nature knew what it was doing when it made citruses fleeting, because after a while you just think, no, pipe down, go away. This is actually becoming like too shrill and like this high-pitched thing that buzzing in your ear, you know, like that's why I prefer, like Frederic Malle again, Jean-Claude Ellena, I prefer the original Cologne Bigarade to the Bigarade Concentré, because it just goes a little bit too like try hard, the other one.
Yeah, I don't like the attempt to extend citruses so far into the heart of the fragrance, or even, God forbid, the base of the fragrance, because the more time that goes by, the way I perceive it is less and less, I mean, for lack of a better word, I mean, authentic. It kind of, you know, you're going to have the authenticity of the naturals or natural adjacents at the beginning, and then as it continues in its progression, there are other things that are trying to fill it in and give that illusion. And I've noticed that too. And it does come off as a bit shrill after a while. And I don't want to talk smack, but what is that line? It is the same line. I think it's the same perfumer that does Nasomato. It's another line.
Yes, he's done one where that it's Alessandro Gualtieri who says that he's made the sort of the most long-lasting citrus scent, and
I never asked for it.
Yes, you're right. What is it called? It's
Bergamusk.
Is it Bergamusk?
Oh goodness!
Is it?
I think it's that. No, I think it's that one. And it's
there you go. Cole is telling us it is Bergamasca by Alessandro Gualtieri. But what's the range called? It's not.
I'm trying to. I mean,
somebody will tell us, because he has his range, but he also has that one.
My goodness, I could just look it up right now. But that one is just so headache induced.
Well, according to at least one person, it's vile.
It starts off fine, but then it's sort of. It really wears on you, and that is testament.
Orto Parisi, thank you very much.
Orto Parisi. Okay, thank you, Will.
This is
my
the
good friend
of
Will.
Doing things live.
Thank you, Will. Will is a good friend of ours here at Effluvium. Thanks for the assistance on that. The weirdest perfume I own. Weird is a good way of putting it, and it just goes to show that citruses just. They don't feel the same when there's a lot of artificial stuff to kind of make it stick around longer. It's just, and it's funny because in the community, people say, look, I want a long-lasting citrus. I would get that, I would wear it, but it doesn't last long enough, and it's just not meant to me. It's just, or it's meant to be in sort of like an opening and not not opening middle enclosure of a fragrance. So it's a scrubber. Yeah, I remember when I wore it, I did have to take a shower. Now that's another great topic too, because there's some fragrances where if I take a shower and I still detect it, I find that to be a problem, but a topic for another time. Persolaise, your third selection.
Oh, yes. So with this, we go back to ginger, and I wonder how many people may have guessed, given all the clues that I've been giving out so far, that, these are all perfumes that you can't get. So again, this is one where if you were to go into a shop right now and ask for this by name, the sales assistant would give you something, but it would most definitely not be this, because this is the original 2008 version of Dior Homme Sport. That was composed by François Demachy, as I believe all of the subsequent versions were composed by François Demachy. Now, this is a bottle that I pounced upon when I found it online, because I got through at least 2 of these bottles before they changed it. It was a complete impulse purchase. We were on holiday in the south of France, and I went to the giant branch of Sephora that's in Nice, and I saw that there was this flanker of Dior Homme, and 2008, even though it was not that long ago, 2008 was long enough ago that when you got a flanker from a brand like Dior, you paid attention. You thought, okay, well, this might be interesting, this will be worth trying. And I was already a huge fan of Olivier Polger's original Dior Homme, and I tried this, and straight away I thought, gosh, this is really clever because I can see that it's got that sort of slight nod to the original Dior Homme, but it really is zesty and fresh and gingery, fizzy, really, really beautifully fizzy and vibrant. And I picked it up straight away, and I didn't regret it for a single second. And then I finished that bottle and bought another one, and then I realized that you couldn't get it anymore. And I still have the few tiniest drops left of one of my original bottles. And then lately I thought, my collection cannot be without this. It's interesting actually smelling this just on the back of the conversation we had about citruses, because this knows when to bring in that segue from the citruses and the ginger and the fizziness to something else. As you were talking, JJ, I was very much thinking, seriously, how many times are we going to mention Jean-Claude Ellena? Because I was thinking, do you remember when he did the cologne for Hermès, the Eau de Mandarine Ambrée, which I think came out at the same time as Narcisse Bleu? Again, a really, really great way of presenting you with a convincing, juicy, fleshy, syrupy citrus. And then you think you're getting that citrus effect, but somehow the scenery is being moved without you even realizing it, and you end up on a equally delicious ambery base. And you don't feel like you've missed anything, and you still kind of think you're getting that hint of citrusness at the end, but it's not shrill, because of course what you're getting is an amber. And it's the same thing here. You've got ginger, lemon, grapefruit, but already that woodiness is coming in. Maybe a touch of iris. I don't know whether that's like wishful thinking on my part to kind of link it with the original Dior Homme, but a really, really nicely done, not overly musky base, something kind of gently cedary, woody, maybe a touch of patchouli. And for somebody who doesn't really participate in sports of any form, this is about as sporty as I want to get. You were talking about playing tennis, Rachel. I was thinking, oh geez, just give me the perfume. I'm not really but yeah, if you do like the sound of it, or if you're prompted to go hunting online for something vintage, then do seek this out. I think it's so special. It's such a shame. It's such a shame that it doesn't exist in this form, and I don't understand why it doesn't exist in this form, because the current version is just. Well, let's not even go there. Yeah.
Just what you were mentioning earlier about how the dry down in Mandarine Ambrée, that it continues the feel of the citrus without there being this attempt to keep it there. And I think that speaks to a certain level of artistry and understanding of how to, what I refer to, and I don't know if this already exists within the lexicon of fragrance discussion, but trompe le nez, where it's like, like trompe l'oeil, when you have the illusion that you see something that's not really there, it's sort of an illusion that you smell something that's not really there through the use of these different accords. And I think that's a really good example of it. So that's where I prefer to get the sensation of citrus, when it is sort of suggested or echoed through whatever happens later in the progression. So great. Well, thank you very much, Fragrance Fight Night. Thus far, I would agree. It's fire. Let's go back to that starred comment from our friend GMG.
Don't we get to know what your third one is, JJ?
Well, I can just put that away until later. We'll get into my third one, and then we'll back up back to it. We'll leave that for the very end of the hour. So my third one. My third one is from the Diptyque, Geranium Odorata. And Geranium Odorata, I want to talk a little bit about how geranium, the relationship that I have with geranium, which is a very strong and loving relationship. And I love fragrances that have it in great quantity. So folks out there who are not aware, geranium is not the geranium that you put on your porch. This is actually in a different botanical family, Pelargonium. And Pelargonium graveolens is the species, and it's often called scented geranium or rose geranium. And what's interesting about it is it has these components that you would also find if you were to see the chemical breakdown of rose. So geraniol, for example, the root of geranium, and a few others, and also certain components that would be found in other herbs, and maybe mint. Though I do think it is a little bit lazy when people say there's a minty geranium, because geranium doesn't necessarily come off as forward minty. but it has facets to it. And what's great about this one is that it seems to exalt all of the qualities that I love about scented or rose geranium. And this, to me, is another great example of trompe le nez. Forgive my pronunciation, because when this dries down, it starts off with that the quenching, to me, very quenching, cooling, and refreshing geranium. It's also supported by citruses, but it dries into the cedar. And it's almost like the seamless sort of dry down where it's just, you can't tell where the geranium ended and the cedar begins. So it's just, you feel like the geranium is still there and hugging you long after it may have completely evaporated. And I think it's beautiful. Beautiful and simplistic. Geranium odorata from Diptyque. And what are your thoughts? Are you both aware of Geranium odorata? No?
I've never tried it, no, but now
I haven't smelt it for a long time, but I remember thinking it was, and I like geranium as a note. Like Geranium pour Monsieur, the Dominique Oppion scent is another one that some people find that one is a little bit too toothpaste for them, but I've never thought that.
I have that here too, just in case somebody chose the other one.
Oh, okay. No, I love that. I love Geranium pour Monsieur, and I love how it's I love the whole story with it and how it led to Portrait of a Lady and everything. But yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that in actually, because maybe sometimes we kind of think too much about citruses as doing this job of cutting through the heat. But yeah, maybe it's the herbal aspect of geranium that does that really well.
Very well then. Okay, now we're back to this. You don't have to, but it is there in case you do.
Well, I'm not going to be coy, but actually, as I'm sort of looking at that question, I'm thinking, gosh, what am I allowed to say? But of course, as soon as I say that, I've kind of answered the question, haven't I? I would say, if you are an Amouage fan, and I know there are gazillions of Amouage fans out there, then this is one that I think you need to try as quickly as you can. Renaud Salmon is doing quite interesting things in the library collection. Obviously, Opus 15 is the newest addition to the library collection. His Opus 14, which was composed by Cécile Zarokian, won lots of fans. I think it even won. Did it win an American Fragrance Foundation award just the other week or something? I think it did for Best Independent Perfume, something along one of those sorts of awards. And interestingly, in relation to what we were talking about just a few minutes ago, a perfume that kind of starts off with a really kind of huge behemoth of a certain note, so big that you almost don't see it. And then when other aspects come into play, you start going, oh, I get how this works now.
Right.
That's kind of how Opus 15 is structured, which is, I think, well, I know is very, very deliberate, but also is what makes it a must try. I think I think Amouage fans would really, really need to make a point of seeking it out. And I'm not just saying that. I would have been saying it had I not had any sneak previews at all. I will also be very genuinely interested to know what people think of the name.
Well, blue.
It has associations, right? You know, every time you hear the word blue with fragrance, it has very specific associations, for me at least. And I'm really curious to see how those associations fit within the world of Amouage. So it gives me a great deal of curiosity, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. That almost strategic. There were a couple of great comments from earlier that I had starred first to share here, just very briefly. Tamara, something to think about: how might climate change affect our fragrance preferences? Now, it's a bit of a heavy subject, but a subject worth visiting, I think. She also says climate is a key ingredient in fragrance. I live in a very arid climate, and I find that I enjoy things in those hotter, more humid climates that I don't enjoy. But climate change, yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Rachel, you can go first on this.
I have them. I bring to relief the hard hitters here sometimes. Rachel, what do you think about how climate change may alter our relationship to fragrance and how we wear it.
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, I'm just really this summer just being in such a different climate that I'm used to. It's puts into stark relief just how much being in a different climate can affect changing one's climate can affect every single part of your life. And of course, it's such a serious issue. I know we love our perfumes and this is our hobby and our passion, but it's in a way so it's unimportant in terms of those bigger issues, but at the same time, it's so connected. And so we, as purchasers, as people who love fragrance and buy fragrance and spend a lot of money on fragrance, we can impact that a little bit with our choices and by being vocal to our big brands, especially the big brands who really, really influence supply chains around the world, to respect farmers, to protect environments, to protect growing regions where things are grown sustainably and where people are and their labor is protected ethically. I mean, we can, with our purchasing power, if we want to, we can be vocal about these things and really, I mean, I know IFRA is coming up, I think in the next couple of years, a lot of big changes about what should be in the environment, what should not be in the environment. It's very, how we protect the artist's palette. All of these are really big issues. And I think that as consumers, we should have some voice in that. And so educating ourselves about the issues, educating ourselves, even though especially the big conglomerates don't want us to know really how it works, I think, but educating ourselves on how materials are produced, where they're produced, how the supply chain works, what's really in the bottles, all of these things I think is really important so that we can make better choices and we can advocate for the things we think is ethical and sustainable, for the best of the consumer, the best for the planet, the best for our future, so that we can continue to enjoy this hobby and this art for many, many generations to come, is my opinion.
Yeah, it's something to consider, not only how climate change affects us as consumers of perfume, but how the industry itself is making an impact on climate change. And then thusly, how does that change our perception of it and what our expectations are of it? But that was a very great answer. Thank you so much, Rachel. I know that you must be parting soon, Persolaise. We have just one more question for you here from Dave B. Thoughts on Enclave? Jokes aside, always hopeful with a new homage, fingers crossed.
Can I just say in relation to the other issue as well?
Oh, of course, absolutely.
No. I cannot add anything to what you said, Rachel. I agree with you 100% wholeheartedly. I think that was a very, very articulate and comprehensive response to that. And yes, you're talking about supply chains and those sorts of issues. And I know, Rachel, you've been very, very kind about the masterclass series that I do on my channel as well, where so often this whole issue of the environmental impact of this industry is raised. So yeah, I think the only thing we can do is just be aware and be vocal, as you say. The question Enclave. Now, this is really, really bad. I'm going to get my iPad here because I want to make sure that I don't. And this is terribly, terribly embarrassing because I get confused between Enclave and Meander, and I just want to make sure. Okay, so Enclave is the one by Julien Rasquinet, and so I think that's the one I'm less keen on, whereas Meander was the one by Mackenzie Riley, which I really, really love. Okay, so Enclave is the one that I think makes slightly too heavy use for my personal taste of woody ambers, but I believe it's been very, very, very successful. From that collection, from that initial quartet, it's the Mackenzie Riley ones that I really like. I love Ashore and I love Meander from that quartet. Oh, if anybody's saying anything, I can't hear them. And I don't know whether you're frozen, Rachel, or whether you're actually still there. I can see the lips moving, but I can't hear you speaking. But it could be something from my end.
you hear me okay?
I can now, yes.
Well, I'm very sorry about that. I'm not sure what kind of technical issue had happened, but I started to have difficulty hearing you on my end. So I think it was specific to what was going on my end. So I do apologize for that.
Don't worry. I mean, there's the kind of stuff that happens with me when I do these things as well. I think it's amazing that we are actually able to do these broadcasts. So the fact that we have glitches every now and then is minor.
Right. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us for this, Persolaise. I hope that we can do this again soon. It's always a pleasure. And I'll be seeing you on some of your own streams when I have the time. It's tough where I am. I usually have to watch the recordings because it's midday and it's my work days, but I sneak in sometimes.
I know, and I should have started by saying thank you very much for accommodating this particular time, because I think you normally do these a little bit sooner, whereas that kind of starts becoming difficult for me on certain days. On some days I can do that sort of earlier time. But thank you. No, seriously, it is for me to thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much for the interesting topic. Thank you very much for prompting me to dig these out. And Rachel, enjoy the rest of your stay in that very interesting part of the world.
Oh, thank you. It's such a pleasure and honor for me just to talk to you, Persolaise. I'm a huge fan. Thank you so much.
The feeling is mutual. Thanks a lot, both. So shall I just leave studio now? Is that what I do?
Yeah, leave the studio immediately. Thank you, Persolaise. We'll talk again very soon.
Thanks
Take care
a lot.
now.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. Okay, well, that was great.
Oh,
great discussion.
What a wonderful person. He's so nice.
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right, folks. So we will be right back after these messages. We're going to move on to our next subject in the second hour. So we'll be back soon. And we're just going to remove ourselves from here for an intermission, and we'll be right back. And we're on our second hour here for the Effluvium Summer Session 1 for June. And our next topic, we're going to move from daytime coolers and refreshers to the scents for the summer nights. So Rachel and I have a few selections that we've set aside to discuss the things that we may want to reach on a night that might still have that residual humidity, but it's cooled down just a little bit. Rachel, I want to hear your first selection for a summer night.
Yeah. So the nights here in Taiwan are amazing. They actually have these things called night markets, and it's because a lot of people just they can't be out in the heat. It's just too hot during the day to be outside. Literally, can be over easily have 99% humidity, over 100 degrees, very easily during the day. So during the night, they'll have night markets, and these are just so fun. There's so many businesses are open. They have rides. It's like some kind of combination of a farmer's market plus a county fair plus normal businesses that are just open all night, right? For people who just can't be awake and out and functioning during the day. It's just too hot, right? So we go out to these night markets at night all the time because it's such a big temperature difference. It's so much more refreshing. There's kind of a cooling wind coming from the sea, at that time of night here. And anyway, so this is when I can at least pull out more of my florals because I was so excited to be in a subtropical place, and these lilies, they smell amazing. I wanted to smell some tropical flowers while I was here, some of my white florals that I love. And speaking of, we were just talking about amouage. I was in Taipei is a big city. It has a lot of the big brands, and they have an amouage store here. So I was in amouage just kind of, smelling things, and I came across a shore. And I have a bottle at home, but I grabbed a sample while I was there.
Do you know what I love right now, Rachel? If you hold that up, look how the color scheme matches almost exactly the backdrop for the stream. I love that.
That's perfect, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Oh my gosh, it's meant to be. It's meant to be. Exactly. So just yesterday, I went with a good friend, Joe, who actually is a funny because, the fragrance community is worldwide. So when I got here, I kind of posted on Instagram, hey, I'm in Taiwan. I'm really excited. My family's here. And then someone, Joe, who is often in a lot of the streams, like who's in Smelly's stream, who watches Persolaise, who's around, part of the community, just DM me, is like, hey, I live in Taiwan. Do you want to get together and go smelling some things? And we did yesterday. Like, we went to a bunch of stores and smelled a bunch of things. And we both really liked this Ashore, which is a brilliant, like, tuberose white floral fragrance. And it works. Like, there's something about kind of the air in a really humid place at night where the white florals really kind of bloom and move through this, like, almost liquidy kind of air in this way that just isn't the same as a temperate climate. It's just different, right? The way smells and molecules move through the air, and especially in the evening. And you can really, really see why jasmine, why ylang, why a lot of white florals are why they're tropical, why they smell so beautifully, why they grow where they grow, right? And so anyway, so Ashore, beautiful, beautiful tuberose white floral fragrance by Amouage that it just wears perfectly at night specifically. I don't know if I'd wear this during the day in the humidity, but at night it blossoms.
I think of that word languorous when I think of it's almost like the scent molecules, because the air is so thick and humid and tropical, they kind of float a little bit longer and or a little bit more slowly, and you just really can get enveloped by them.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. Yeah.
And I think of, the fact that these flowers, they're white because they attract these nighttime pollinators. And I think of these mysterious, beautiful moths that fly to them and drink the nectar and pollinate them and stuff. It's so, I romanticize it in my head. It's just great, like jasmine and like datura blossoms and gardenia, because the one I have is a gardenia scent, and it is decidedly a unisex gardenia scent. I actually shared it as a review on Instagram /basenote/fragrantica today, and my selection that I think would be wonderful for, say, a summer evening out is Boutonniere number 7, Boutonniere.
Ooh, artiste. Yeah.
I'll put myself on close up to show this. Now, sadly, this one doesn't get nearly as much attention as other artistes, and I think that is a shame. This is Rodrigo Flores Roux, and I'm very fond of a lot of his work. He did a wonderful job with Roberto Greco's Pote Sapo, and this gives me kind of a similar feel. This is something that opens up very herbal and almost fougere-like, accompanied by this ripe gardenia. It's like a gardenia that's sort of in the middle of green and mature, you know what I mean? It's like in that stage. And it just smells so glorious on my skin. It just is like resonant. And then it dries into something that feels sort of like it's moving towards a bit of more of a jasmine direction, but it almost kind of reminds me a little bit of night blooming jasmine as well. And there's a vetiver that comes through, another example of this sort of transition where I think it's brilliant, the idea of having, a gardenia that transitions into a vetiver, because I think those two accords complement each other very well, because there is this shared sort of grassiness to both of them. And when the lactonic aspect, because gardenia does have that kind of lactonic aspect, which isn't really too for it here, thankfully, because I don't think, like, sometimes, like, when it's too lactonic, it's almost too coconutty for me. And I like that it's tempered here. When it dries into the vetiver, that lactonic quality almost brings out these cool effects with the vetiver in its dry down. It's just, I think it's great. I think it also bridges old time, bygone floral fragrance with modern men's fragrance. It's such an interesting combination of two different I think it's brilliant. I many glowing reviews, and I'm like, why I'm going to have to write the glowing review. So I did that.
I think you've hit on something really, really, really important about Rodrigo Flores Roux and his capabilities, because he's one of the only perfumers that I know that is able to thread that needle of classic, contemporary, male and female, and keep all those threads knit together and do it so beautifully and so wonderfully. And very few people, I think, can do that. And I'm so impressed with his abilities to exactly like bring classic into the moderns without losing the thread, like knit traditional, gender tropes together in this way that's so successful. And I think that's so spot on. And I think I see in his work like that talent that's so like blazing to me. I think it's so cool. Yeah.
And also he brings out those kind of mushroomy qualities a little bit too that come with Gardenia. And the way there's an interplay between that and a petit clan that you experience kind of a little bit further in after it's. I mean, just spraying it out of the nozzle, like you get all of that together. It's all sort of like it's like this fanfare, and I love how it starts off as that, and then the development sort of like everything, the layers are kind of peeled away until it's just more of like a subtle floral woodiness at the dry down. I think it's brilliant. It took me a long time to finally commit to a full bottle of it. I was like, this is something that I wanted to mention about this. This is testament to letting other people decide if something is good versus just deciding for yourself.
Yes.
And I've been guilty of that. And I'll read other reviews and I'm like, well, I liked it, but it seems like this is getting a lot of negative reviews or, so-so reviews. So maybe they're right. Yeah. And I'm like, F that. Like, I sprayed it. I had a sample and I sprayed it again. And I'm like, I love this. And maybe it just, maybe I need to give it the attention that it needs so that the right people who discover it will find that they enjoy it as well. So it's one of my favorites from him.
It's so good. Yes. And it could be that you're right. Like that. And it's oh my gosh, it's so personal, right? It could be your skin, the place you're in, that, that some, like the fragrances that I was talking about earlier, that maybe they come alive in the right environment. A lot of times you don't know where the people, you don't know where they live, where they're writing, what they're, you just, and people have that. Some people like a very broad spectrum of smells, and some people have a very narrow range that they love and find acceptable. And we're all different. Like with food, some people have a very narrow range that they can eat for medical reasons, for all kind of reasons. So you never know why someone, has the specific reactions that they do. And so it's really important to, as with everything, right? Like with kindness and understanding, of course, and empathy, but always, trust your gut and go with what you want on your body and what you want to wear and what pleases you and what you find intellectually stimulating, right? Even if someone even if your biggest perfume hero like Persolaise, right? Even if they disagree, that's wonderful and it's great and it's good information, especially someone you trust, but always ultimately go with your own gut. Yeah.
And that's what I'm learning nowadays. And then there are just going to be certain fragrances that seem to have such critical acclaim, and everybody thinks it's just one of the greatest fragrances. They may even put it on the #1 fragrances list of the #1 of their list of all-time best fragrances, and you're like, no, but that wouldn't be up there for me, and that's okay too. It's which is I don't like to draw a ton of attention to that. But I think that it can be implied from the omissions. The things that I'm not really mentioning are probably the ones where it doesn't do it for me personally, and that's not it's not a dismissive thing. It just there has to be, that you can write critically and examine critically a fragrance and understand that it serves its purpose, it delivers its concept, it will satisfy the right audience. You can do that without shitting on it, but also say like, this doesn't do it for me. It doesn't make me feel good. And I think that's a good way to do kind of like, a lot of constructive reviews. That being said, there were a lot of reviews that were, not so good. I mean, there were a few and I'm like, okay, I must be in that camp. And, and now, yeah, it's become a favorite of mine from Rodrigo
Cool.
Boutonniere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great house. I really, I'm sorry, I just wanted to say, I really, honestly, I don't think Arquiste makes a fragrance that I dislike, which is rare.
Yeah. No, I've appreciated pretty much all of them so far. Getting larger and larger. No, Terry, it's not now. It's slowing down now. It really is. It's just not. I mean, I can't tell other people how. I've said this recently. I don't know if it was on Instagram or elsewhere. That we shouldn't really be in the place to tell other people how they should collect, how much or how little they should have. We shouldn't really criticize them for how much they've used of a fragrance or how little they use of a fragrance, because everybody has their own relationship to the hobby. It's like we were talking about earlier. Persolaise loves Après le Mousson, but he doesn't wear it. He smells it on the strip. The concept of gatekeeping, which has been discussed by our good friend Derek Varanus-Rederi, it's the principle that there are right and wrong ways to talk about fragrance, write about fragrance, wear it, collect it, use it, own it. And I think it's important to get out of that conversation. And just let people choose to the way that they go about their hobby their own way. And what was that? Oh, you know what it was actually? Our good friend Fliss. She had a great post. It wasn't that long ago, where she talked about sort of like that snobbery of if you don't have the full bottle of a fragrance, then you don't really own it. You don't really wholly appreciate it. And that's kind of sad to kind of get, not true at all. And more, and to get back to Terry's comment, like it sure seems like it, because I'm always coming up with something I haven't talked about before. But I'm beginning to appreciate that certain fragrances, if I like it, I don't need to get the whole bottle. You don't need to have like that quantity. And that's for everybody out there, I just think it's important to bring that up. You just be okay with, if you have 20 fragrances and you're afraid of spending too much money, you don't have to spend any more money. Trade samples, decants, and be happy with what you have, and just, or if you're somebody like me or some of us who have a lot in their collection, don't let other people harass you for, like, how are you ever going to get through all those fragrances? You're never going to wear them. Well, it isn't always about, contrary to what some people think, and this is a gatekeeping mentality, fragrance isn't always about wearing it either.
Yeah.
Just like people who have car collections. People are not always driving all of their cars.
Yeah. Or book collections, right?
You're
literally not constantly reading every single book. You open one up and find a reference, or you read it. There are books that I own that will only read once or twice in my lifetime, but I still want to own it, Yeah.
And there's no wrong way to having a library of any type, whether it's a book library or a fragrance library. Yeah.
It's weird because I feel like, people who collect LPs or albums or music, I feel like they don't really get as much criticism as like fragrance collectors, when I feel like it's quite similar actually. And people don't get criticism. I mean, maybe they're starting to now that technology is moving away from written language, but like people don't really get the same criticism for having a collection of books or a collection of teapots or a collection of, pretty much anything else. With fragrance is so commodified in these weird ways.
No, it's true. And I think that it's also because fragrance is seen in different ways. It's seen as an art. It's seen as a craft. It's seen as a product that serves a function. And I think when we're in that space of looking at fragrance as serving a function, if that function isn't fulfilled necessarily, we may think that the fragrance isn't being used to its full intention, like what it was intended for.
Yeah.
But that's not for us to decide, Like I just, I see that happen sometimes where, you know, it's interesting. Like sometimes, like if I finally share a bottle and it has a dent in it, everybody's like, oh, wow, you have a bottle that has a dent in it? Like you used that fragrance? And yeah. Or I bought it with a dent in it. Who knows? It doesn't matter. Yeah. Let's get to your next one for summer, summer wear, summer evening wear.
Yes, I think for this we will go for some incense because one of the most interesting things. So this is first fragrance. This is it's a brand called Olabanum, and this is when ambrette. So this was started by Gerard Gislaine from Histoires de Parfum, and it's a really simple concept where they have this base fragrance made from Olabanum, right? And that's pretty much just a one note fragrance. And then the rest of them is Olabanum plus one other material. So you're like Olabanum plus, in this case, ambrette, or Olabanum and tuberose, or Olabanum and you name it, right? I think there's something like 14 or 16 in the line. So it really is a very minimalist kind of Zen idea where you have Olabanum, and it's the same base Olabanum for each fragrance plus just one other material. And here in Taiwan, one of the most interesting things about Taiwan is, if you don't know kind of the history of the island, is when there was a civil war in China back in the early part of last century, in the early 1900s, well, mid actually 1900s, the communists versus the nationalists, like Democratic Republican government, had a civil war, and the nationalists, the Democratic Republic of China, they lost basically, and they were in retreat. They moved the head of the government, like they took all the or a lot of the national treasures and the National Library, etc., and the whole government to the nation of Taiwan. And then the communists and Mao Zedong took over mainland China. And then they've had two separate histories, and that's some of the tensions as of right now. Is, you know, is Taiwan part of China or not? But two separate governments, and for a long time, the international world, or at least the democratic West, recognized Taiwan as the official China because the government had moved there during the Civil War. Eventually, of course, everyone came to realize, well, the communists were in charge of the entire mainland. So obviously, like China, that people had to, for economic reasons and lots of political reasons, people had to recognize the people who were actually ruling mainland China as the Communist Party that is still there today. Anyway, one of the interesting things about Taiwan is because they never went through the Cultural Revolution, because they never went through the communist years, much of the traditional, syncretic, very, very old religions that are like Taoist-based, Buddhist-based, etc., still are alive and practiced in Taiwan, whereas they have, for a couple generations, they really have not been practiced. And those practices really have died out on mainland China. So in Taiwan, there's incense everywhere. You smell incense everywhere you go, because there's on almost every street, there's some kind of temple, whether it's a temple to a local god or a Buddhist temple or a Taoist temple or all kinds of temples, right? So there's incense everywhere, which is like fantastic. And so I've been like craving an incense perfume. And so since I've been here, I've actually bought two. One is Laves, right? The kind of
Laves.
Which I've had a million samples and I've never just pulled the trigger on a bottle, and I found one, so I just bought it.
The bottle's like a work of art too. It's so like display worthy.
And then this brand that I discovered, I've never heard of before, which is again the Olabanum plus just one other material, and it's really good. And I found this with the ambrette; it has that kind of musky sweetness to it that works really well. And then I found that actually wearing a light, because it's not too heavy, right? The Olabanum isn't too heavy, especially if you spray minimally, and especially at night, like that richness of the incense at night is really beautiful.
I'm fascinated with the idea that you would put together this ambrette seed, an ambrette with the olibanum, and what the ambrette would do with the olibanum as far as like how it would change the texture a little bit, and vice versa.
It's so interesting because to me, at least, it makes it a little almondy. Like it really pulls out kind of the almond facets, and it makes it makes the Olabanum a little bit softer and more cottony.
Yes.
In texture. Right. So it makes it kind of instead of to me, like an olibanum has a kind of a gritty texture a little bit in the air, and so it like softens it up and pillows it out a little
Yep.
bit. So it makes it just a little bit more like a kind of cloud. It makes it a little cloudier and more diffuse in the air a little bit. And to me, at least, it brings out and maybe it's just the way this was constructed. So who knows? But it has a distinct almondy aspect.
I love the idea of there being two different types of clouds. There is the incense cloud of the olibanum, but then there is that billowy cloud of the ambret as well, because of those musk components in it.
Yeah.
It has me really interested in trying it out because I love both, and I haven't really run into any fragrances that would pair the two together. So that's cool. And you said that the other one that you got was the olibanum and tuberose. Is that the other?
So I got a sample set, actually. So I do have that as part of the sample set, which I think you can order in the United States also. But I'll send you some samples too.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I've looked at that house and I'm like, well, I have to check that out because I love frankincense and olibanum. So yeah, I'd be really excited to try some of it. Currently we have 35 likes. If folks who are tuned in, if you haven't hit the like button, please do so. Let's try to aim for 45 likes here on the stream. Like the stream, please. Thank you very much, my friends. My next one is one that's been discontinued. Oh, boo-hoo. It's this one here. Oh my God, look at this. This matches the background too.
Perfect.
Look at that. All right, hold on a second. Let's zoom in here. See, it's matching the background. This is a Suvialo from L'Artisan Parfumeur, and sadly, this has been discontinued. But when I was thinking of fragrances that would just bloom on a summer night, where there's still that residual heat, but there's a little bit more of a cool breeze, this is one that immediately came to mind for me. This is a Bertrand Duchefort, and it is built around an orange blossom, but it has this olive to it. Now, the olive blossom is in the notes breakdown, but it's almost like the olive fruit too, because there's a certain unctuousness and oiliness to this that gives it this sort of waxy sort of texture to it. There's also beeswax that contributes to that as well. And there's some floral qualities, resinous qualities, benzoin, and there's our olibanum in the dry down. So there's an incensey aspect to it with that benzoin and olibanum together. This is just beautiful, beautiful stuff. It just feels so animated on my skin. Like it just has like a substantivity to it. And I'm not just meaning substantivity as far as like performance and all that, but like a substantivity as in it has like a presence. It's sort of, it creates this bubble. And I find that to be really beautiful. And just, it's quite sad that they're not producing this anymore. It is probably
so good. I've never tried it. It sounds amazing.
Well, I want to try to get some to you then, because I think you deserve to give this a try. It's one of the best from L'Artisan in its whole history. Just gorgeous stuff. And I think this is just would be great to wear at night because it is a little bit heavier. It's an opportunity to wear something that isn't so lightweight in the summertime, but it complements the summer air so well. So
Yes, 100%. Absolutely. Yeah.
Give me 1 second. I will be right back. Just entertain the folks there. I will be back in just a jiffy.
All right. So I will tell you guys something that was really interesting that I did a couple days ago. I don't know if you've heard of the fragrance brand Le Jardin Retrouvé, the rediscovered garden, right? So it's this wonderful, wonderful French perfume house that was started a little while ago, I believe in the 70s, by a perfumer whose father was a perfumer in Russia, and his father actually worked as a chemist on some of our basic molecules and compounds in the fragrance industry. So it was a really, cool, long tradition. It's actually this really romantic story of like how the house in France got started. Maybe I'll tell it quickly. So there was the perfumer, the grandfather, in Russia. So before he started working as a perfumer, he had to get his family out of Russia because of the revolution. And so he sent his wife and his very young son to Paris. After that, he became his Yuri, I believe. I'm sorry. I should have looked up the names before the story, but the grandfather, he started, and then later after that, after he sent his family to France, and they never saw each other again, I believe, but he became a perfumer. Because the times and the not being able to communicate back then, his son, unbeknownst to him when he grew up, also became a perfumer, and they didn't know that about each other, that they both ended up becoming perfumers, one in Russia, one in France. So the perfumer in France, so I guess it's a father and a son, I'm sorry, ended up founding Le Jardin Retrouvé, which is now, the fragrance house that we know now, that closed for a few years, but then it was reopened using those original formulations, which are still what you can buy today, which is fantastic because it's great. Because a lot of, I feel like there's been this rash of like fake old perfume house, like the Creed story, right? These fake old perfume houses, or these fake, we discovered these secret formulas from 200 years ago, so we're bringing back this fragrance house, and then but it's all like they're all new constructions, and there's nothing wrong with new formulations based on classical styles, etc. That's great. That's fabulous. It's a fabulous work of imagination and art, but you still should cleave to the truth in some ways, so you're not deceiving people.
Right.
There's imagination and poetics and storytelling, and then there's like truth, right? And we should be careful about that, I think, in the PR world. But so this is the real story of a real house that was like brought back and using the actual original formulas. And the reason they're able to do this is that the original French perfumer, and this is just going back to the 70s, right? So it's not super ancient, right? They had this great relationship with an oil house that was eventually bought by, I believe, Givaudan. And so they have these original connections, and they can use they have kind of this special relationship where they can use some of these very specific materials you should really get to know this brand. And I wish I don't have my notes with me, otherwise I could give you more specific details, but they are starting to sell their perfume in Taiwan. And so they had a launch event like last week, and I was able to go to that, and I was able to meet Clara and Michel, who are the owners who are the relatives. So he's Michel is the grandson of the Russian perfumer, the son of the French perfumer. And so we got I was able to test the whole line and get some beautiful samples. And like their tuberose fragrance, which is one of the original formulations from the 70s that has not been changed. It's still very, I think when I asked them about the materials, and again, I don't have my notes, I'm sorry. But so this could be wrong, but it's only something like 1 or 2 or 3 materials that they've had to change due to IFRA and, modern standards or something like that. But they're very, very much true. Because it's their family, right? So they're really cleaving true to those original formulas. And the tuberose is one of the original ones, and it's a beautiful, beautiful tuberose. And then they've had 2 new formulations, 2 new fragrances that were created just in the past couple of years. One of them is Osmat Leo Yuan, which is a beautiful osmanthus fragrance, and the other one is a beautiful Japanese cedar fragrance that is I'm blanking on the name, I'm sorry.
Is the mousse one mousse Arashiyama? Oh, yes. Okay. So
that's
can we talk about? Oh my God, it's so good. Let me tell you.
So good.
So Christian, who will actually be our guest next month for July's summer session, he goes by Icarus Midair, for those who may be familiar with him on Instagram. Such a talented artist with paper origami, his sculptures and creations that he does to complement fragrances. He's just a brilliant artist, and he was very aware that I was just starting to get into Le Jardin Retrouve because of Sandalwood Sacre, which I find to be such a pleasant surprise for sandalwood, because I was like, oh, this must have been composed 40 plus years ago, because I love those sandalwoods from that time period. And he said, well, you know, I'll send you some samples. He sent me two others from the house. Jasmine Majorelle, which I think is beautiful as well. And Mousse Arashiyama. And Mousse Arashiyama is brilliant because what it does is it uses a mastic resin to lift the oak moss accord. And I thought, like, I'll be damned. Like, that is such
a good
an
idea.
ingenious idea, especially in this age where we have restrictions on using oak moss, and perfumers need to be a little bit more innovative. And the two have this great synergy. It's just gorgeous stuff. And then the Jasmine Majorelle, it kind of reminds, it's the same thing as the Boutonniere number 7 from Arquiste. It's sort of treading the line between this sort of like classical citrus aromatic, but then the floral that's in the middle is it is so wonderfully imposing that it creates sort of like, for lack of a better word, I know some people like to say pissy jasmine, and I know for some people they're like, how on earth is that appetizing? But it's a jasmine that is raw. It's just
real
raw,
to life.
Real to life, indoles, citruses that are bringing out qualities that are just a bit sharp, but just so invigorating and beautiful. Such brilliant stuff. And I know for sure this is not going to appeal to those who are into more mainstream perfumery, because most of them, and even the new compositions, are done in not in the most modern style. And what's funny is if you go to Scentbird, and Scentbird does happen to sell them, and or you could get the decants, what have you, on Scentbird. The reviews eviscerate the house, because many people who use Scentbird are very younger people into modern stuff, and the amount of ageist shit that's thrown about over this house, this smells like an old man, a grandma, it smells like Depends, it smells like a nursing home. Oh my God. They were so offensive to the point where they're hilarious, because it's so predictable after a while. And then you have that occasional person who probably was there because I realized Le Jardin is actually being sold. And you get this kind of more merciful review, but it's so funny because these are not fragrances for the Baccarat Rouge crowd at all.
No. They're so beautiful, and you're right, they're so full body and so interesting, and they're so complex, and it's, I think you picked up on that brilliant sandalwood for a reason. It's actually because Yuri, the French perfumer, he actually lived and worked in India making perfumes for many, many, many years, and so he really saw firsthand how great the sandalwood is, how great the jasmine in India is, how it's so indolic there and lush and beautiful, and so that's his real life experience, is how the big, the bold, the lush, and of course that style back then. And and the fact that they're really staying so true to those reformulations, and not taking that easy money making, watering it down, going for that style, right? I mean, that props to them for really, really sticking with that heritage, that house style. It's wonderful. Even with the new creations, I think that those standards are fantastic, and I'm so glad that they just exist in the world, right? And a great thing about them is they're really committed to sustainability on really all the levels, which is wonderful to see. It's a wonderful house. Absolutely.
It's funny because I would say it's my favorite new house, but it's certainly not a new house. My favorite personal new discovery. And the update of the bottles is just, I love the look of the bottles. I know that there was some concern on Instagram about the appropriation of some of the imagery, but as far as I knew, wasn't some of that they already had somebody who consulted them on that, or or was there some confusion? I mean, I know that's a touchy subject,
So It's funny. Someone asked that question at the event, or they
Yeah.
they didn't really ask that question. There was some mistranslations happening for politeness, but someone asked about it, and the question was translated into English more as, "Can you tell us more about your artist?" And so it wasn't really hit on. But Clara, who's kind of the artistic director, she said, "Oh, well, I work with this young, I believe in their early 20s, a young artist in France who does the artwork." And it's the same thing with actually one of the names. They use Oriental in one of the names of the perfumes, right?
Oriental
Something, yeah. And it's one of those things that within the cultural context of France, that perhaps has not made as many forward steps as, like, say, the United States or Scandinavian. They're just not in the same place culturally.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be a discussion that would be great to have with Clara or Michelle about how that's something that could maybe be improved on, or just a conversation to be had. I'm not even sure if they're aware of it, of those criticisms, to be honest.
That's important to bring up too, because approaching this conversation with compassion, I think, is an important thing, because many people are not aware of this. And the awareness could be approached in a way that that isn't sort of like a pointing finger sort of thing, but more like, let's have this discussion on this and give constructive feedback and see, if we can move in a direction that is more sensitive and respectful. Not that was intentional, because I don't think it's intentional a lot of the time. I don't think, obviously people don't want to intentionally offend,
but they might
through
not,
cultural appropriation.
They might not have they need to go through I don't know if education is the right word, but they need to have the understanding. And
it's important. Mm-hmm.
And I do think that part of the origin story of the brand is the time that the brand spent in India.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you're right, we live in today, and in today it probably isn't the most appropriate. And so it really is important to have that engaging conversation with the owners. And it's like, for example, in that event, how that was politely mistranslated. I can see how maybe people want to be nice in a business context, etc. So maybe it hasn't been brought up.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. It's a really good question.
But that aside, that is something that I personally am willing to forgive, given there's some catching up to do, with a lot of us. And as a house as a whole, I'm just really impressed with its, the heritage of it, the compositions, the respect for perfumery, the art of perfumery, and I think it's great. It's great. And we're just going to go over to the chat just a little bit. We have a question from Not in the Know, aka Oscar. Rachel, are you involved in the perfume industry or an enthusiast?
Oh, I have no involvement in the industry. Just an enthusiast. I teach. I'm a high school teacher. That's my profession, and I teach. I have a club. I teach an after school perfume appreciation club for kids. So if that's, I don't know if you consider that an involvement in the industry, where I host an after school club for 15 to 18-year-olds to sniff, just like we do, sniff fragrances and talk about notes and learn about how perfume is made. So if they have an interest in perfume, I try to teach them how they can have a career in the industry if they're interested, because it's really hard to find that information out actually as a youngster. Many people don't enter the career field until their 30s or 40s just because they don't know how, right? So I'm trying to get that information to them earlier. So if they want to become a perfumer or get involved in the business, they might have a chance a little earlier, like that many of us don't find this hobby until we're well into our adulthood. So I run an after school. I'm a high school teacher. I run an after school club. I also take classes at the Institute of Art and Olfaction just for fun, because they have some really cool classes that I definitely recommend you guys check out, like about perfume history, about individual materials, all kinds of stuff. So that's my involvement.
I get that question sometimes too, and it's very flattering. And she was absolutely right. I'm sorry, Not in the Know. I don't want to misgender you. You have great knowledge. She is correct in that. Your knowledge is really impressive. So
because I read JJ's posts, I have great knowledge because I read other people.
You have JJ,
JJ is a perfumer. He's trained as a perfumer, and Like, and so he has that knowledge, but just tons of years of smelling perfume, and especially perfume that I don't necessarily wear, because we all have different collections and proclivities, and we all learn from each other. Like, that's what this community comes together, and that's what we do. We learn from each other. So if I know stuff, it's because of you guys.
We all learn from each other. The best thing, I don't like to see it as a pyramid. I like to see it in a very different sort of, I think I'd like to see it as a circle rather than a pyramid. So, there's some people who are subject matter experts and they're very self-aware of it. They're very much like, I'm the subject matter expert. I know what I'm talking about, and I'm telling everybody how much I know. And then you have the circle where everybody's like, hey, I didn't know about that. I'm glad that you're educating me on that. You have so much to offer. And everybody is appreciating that circle of knowledge is being shared. And I think it's great. I think that's what really builds a community. It's almost like the sun in the back. It's a circle. It's great stuff. We have, I think, one more of the summer wares. If you want to share your third one. Summer evening wears. Absolutely. To be specific. Yes.
I will actually share another one of these P7, this brand P7, this Taiwanese brand. This one is called Ruby, and I find this one really, this is actually an EDT, and I find it a little easier to wear at night, which is the first one was an eau de parfum, interestingly, but I find it better to wear during the day. And this one is an EDT, and I find it better to wear it at night because it's more floral. So this one also has, because most of her fragrances, this is Pan Changyu, I believe is the perfumer's name. I could be wrong, but I believe that's it. So this one has a tea note also. There's a specific varietal of black tea here called the Sun Moon Lake tea, which is it's a lighter form of black tea, and it has some kind of fruity overtones, which is really beautiful. So you have like a tea with fruity overtones paired with osmanthus, as well as champaka and blood orange. So it's the addition of those florals that, again, makes it really bloom at night, I think, and really kind of takes the tea note to another level. For me, the flowers draw out the fruity aspects of the tea, which is really fantastic. And it really is a little bit richer in the floralcy kind of direction, and so it makes it a great night fragrance while still incorporating that beautiful local Taiwanese tea, like that aspect of the brand that's really kind of recognizable and so interesting and so unique. And so, yeah, that's one I would say has been really cool here at night.
Wow, you're really bringing out some of these brands and selections that I don't know anything about, and
we'll do a swap.
Yeah, we have to do that. Yeah, I owe you, because I am still waiting for the right moment. I haven't even done it yet because I'm waiting for the right moment, because it's such anticipation to try this vintage Coty sticks.
Oh, yes. Oh, cool. Awesome.
I haven't sprayed it yet. I just want to just get my bearings together and be prepared for it. But I thank you so much for this. This is incredible.
Well, it's like you want to share, like the coolest stuff you want to share with people so you can talk about it.
Yeah, totally. All right, so I have my third one for summer evenings, and it is not that one. I picked up the wrong Santa Maria Novella. It is this Santa Maria Novella, and this is Ginestre. In French, it's called Genet, and in English, Broom. So this focuses on the broom flower.
Yeah.
And the broom flower, it is a flower that has like this sunny disposition to it, but it's also very agrestic as well. It kind of reminds me a little bit of that same feel as like a narcissus, but also it's a little sweet. There is actually a narcissus note in this as well, and there's a violet that kind of brings out the qualities of that of the broom in this. Orange blossom, and it would smell great on a summer evening because it just has this it's so diffusive, beautifully diffusive. It gives you sort of like an aura, and broom flower is such an old world kind of note in a fragrance. Like I have these old books, like Louis Appel, and there are all these bases, and so many of these bases at the time, like in the early like 20th century, called for using Genet or Brome Absolute in it. And
Cool.
you know, go figure, you know, like Santa Maria Novella, that's kind of their thing. But it just smells so good. It's like it smells like a breeze. It smells like a
Yes.
breeze along like just, you know what it kind of reminds me of? So here in New England, we have cliff walks. So often there will be these sort of these paths or walks that will be built onto the cliffs. There's a cliff walk that's in Algonquin, Maine. And I think I might have actually referenced it in the review that I wrote for Genestra. But it reminds me of all of the smells that kind of coalesce, because there is sort of like even like a little bit of a salty element in this as well. So it feels a little bit like sea air, but nothing like any other kind of aquatic scent. Just that sea air, that kind of saline, salty sea air with the broom, the flowers, they have different, they call them pitch pines and junipers that grow on it. It's all of that together, and it just smells like that, magnified.
Wow, that would be so great in this weather, because those are exactly the kind of like northern fragrances I just want to smell right now.
Yeah. Genestra it's great. It isn't as discussed as some of the other Santa Maria Novella, but it's among my favorites. I think, did I pick this one up at Pickwick's Mercantile in Portsmouth? I don't think, no, maybe I actually bought it at, I think probably 80s de Venustus was selling this. But yeah, this is a great one to wear like in a summer evening on a cliff walk at sunset.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I want to have that. I remember, so I lived in New Hampshire for a couple years in grad school, and I love New England, and I miss the way it's like the nature of New England, because just it's right there, it's everywhere. You're just in nature all the time in New England, and I miss it so much.
Yeah, it's a magical place. Like I never, like I've been here my whole life, and sometimes I take it for granted, and then I realize, wow, there's just so much beauty here. Yeah. And, when there isn't the opportunity to travel far, you can always find some new destination in New England. It's wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. Carl A is here. As the name suggests, Jupe Nuit d'été is a beautiful summer night scent. Unfortunately, has been discontinued for a long time. There's a number of Jope. Did I say Jupe? I went ahead and just said Jupe. Jope. A lot of Jope fragrances were discontinued that were great. There was that one that has like a big heliotrope note. Is that the one, Carl A? There's one from the early 90s, and it has this beautiful kind of heliotrope. It's long been discontinued. The bottles go for like $300. It's just insane. I'd be happy just getting like a little sample of it. And Terry Smile says, smells like a spring walk through a flower garden or a summer walk through a flower garden. Works well in the summer as well. Great. Well, those are the selections that I have for summer nights. Next month, we're looking at, I think, July 24th, if I'm not mistaken. Let's look at that. Or till July 25th, actually. And it's going to be another earlier, or at least earlier in this time zone, stream. And that will be Christian Marianichuk. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. Folks, if you want to find out about his musings on fragrance or his visual art accompaniments for fragrance, check him out Instagram, Icarus Midair. I will put that in the chat right now. He is on Instagram, and this is his username. He will be our guest in July. And then I am still working on guests for us for the August installment. Awesome. So stay tuned for that. Yeah. I don't want to give away the possible guests, but there's a couple that I'm going to try to get in for that. So Rachel, this has been fun.
Yes. Thank you so much. I'm always so privileged and lucky and happy to join you. And thank you so much for having me. And
of course,
it's always so awesome. Yeah.
And of course, if you can, I hope that you can be with me for the other two sessions.
I'd love to. Yeah.
That'd be
Of course.
wonderful.
Yeah.
And just stick around backstage for a little bit. I'm just going to close out for the stream here. And everybody, take care. I'm glad that people could tune in for this, and it was good to see a lot of you tuned in. Once again, thank you so much to Persolaise. He is such a joy and such a fountain of knowledge and insight as a fragrance enthusiast like all of us. So that was really wonderful as well. We Are Sentient does have a suggestion for August. We'll see if we can make that happen. I have my connections, apparently. Maybe I could have him on. Who knows? You never know. And thank you, PS, as always. Time is now 4:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to sign off here, but everybody be well. I'm just going to take us out of the stream here and do our closing theme here. All right, everyone, take care, be well, and stay safe.